Before we begin, this video is based on our understanding of the Nioh series' story and lore, and reflects our interpretation of its events as a refresher before Nioh 3. As always, we recommend that you make your own informed call by looking into the game yourself and ensuring that it matches your expectations, standards, and personal values. With that out of the way, let's begin. We previously covered the full stories of Nioh and Nioh 2, including their DLCs. In this video, we've compiled both parts into one complete section, and added a brand new third segment exploring what could happen in Nioh 3, so this compilation offers fresh value as well. Feudal Japan stories, especially in video games, often tend to fall into some familiar periods, the Bakumatsu period being particularly popular. However, before the fall of the Tokugawa Shogunate, leading into the Meiji Restoration, was the era leading up to its formation, where samurai and ninja roamed the battlefields as legendary figures clashed. That's right, the late Sengoku era, which forms a fitting backdrop for Team Ninja's Nioh series. Now, the house that Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive built is no stranger to dark fantasy, but its hack and slash efforts have been of the fast-paced variety. Before Nioh, it never really tussled with Souls-like mechanics, and anyway, how would that even work? How would the combo-heavy gameplay mesh with a stamina meter and switchable stances for each weapon? Well, as it turns out, quite well. Launched in 2017 for the PS4 and later that year for PC, Nioh received significant critical acclaim for its setting, gameplay, and difficulty. It even went on to ship more than 1 million units worldwide in the first 2 weeks. Not bad for a new IP, and certainly a morale booster for the studio after the abysmal Ninja Gaiden 3. With Nioh 3 launching on February 6th, arriving 9 years after the first game, it's worth diving into the world of Nioh and asking the most important question. What the heck actually happened in Nioh 1? Contrary to what you would expect, it all begins in London, 1598, the latter years of the Anglo-Spanish War. Originally tasked by Queen Elizabeth I to find a mysterious substance called Amrita in Japan, William Adams instead finds himself in prison in the Tower of London. Not wanting to remain a permanent guest, he escapes with the help of Saoirse. Based on the Marrow, equivalent to mermaid in Irish folklore, which fits with the real-world William's occupation as a navigator, she's been our hero since he was a child. It's one of the reasons he's lived for so long, defying death. Despite the escape attempt going swimmingly, and I'm not going to say how many times I died if you won't, Williams crosses paths with the mysterious Edward Kelly after defeating Derek the Executioner. Kelly wants the Amrita for his own nefarious purposes and showcases exactly what they're capable of, corrupting Derek's corpse and initiating Phase 2 of the fight. William emerges victorious thanks to Saoirse's living weapon attack, but loses her to Kelly, who then disappears. Following his own harrowing escape, the plan is set. Investigate the Amrita for the sake of Queen and country. Recover Saoirse from Kelly, and maybe give him a proper thrashing in response. This leads to a voyage with 3 other accompanying ships, and though the others don't make it, William acknowledges that his own is far from lucky, since the only thing that awaits them in Japan is monsters and death. You see, because of the long-standing strife and the war of the late Sengoku era, yokai have begun to emerge and wreak havoc on the unsuspecting populace. William goes up against an Oni and just manages to defeat it before meeting up with Hattori Hanzo, an Iga shinobi aligned with Tokugawa Ieyasu. He also meets Nekomata, providing details on Japan, the various factions, and much more, including translation. As William works with Ieyasu, we learn more about the latter's opposition, Ishida Mitsunari. To attain his own vision of a unified Japan, he allies with Edward Kelly. Other notable allies include Tachibana Ginshio, master of the Raikiri, who teams up with William to find her husband, Munashige. There's also Okatsu, a kunoichi of the Hitari, who warms up to William despite her initial distrust, and who's the daughter of Ieyasu, and Tenkai, a mysterious monk. William undertakes more missions under Ieyasu, barely missing Kelly throughout. Not only does the latter revive Nohime, the late Oda Nobunaga's wife, into a Yukiona, but he also causes a crisis in Kyoto, weakening a seal to unleash yokai, which leads to Nekomata sacrificing itself so that William and Tenkai can mend it. Kelly even mind controls Okatsu, though she's saved by William. All these events, the intrigue and hostilities between Ieyasu and Mitsunari, ultimately lead to the Battle of Sekigahara, a bloody conflict, and in the midst of it, William fights off Otani Yoshitsugu and Shima Sakon, Mitsunari's allies. Ieyasu and his army gain the advantage, though Mitsunari tries to fight back, allowing Kelly to create a Gashadokuru, read a massive, malevolent skeleton, by sacrificing hundreds of his soldiers. Together with Hanzo and Tenkai, William ultimately defeats it before battling Mitsunari, or rather a corrupted version of him twisted into a yokai by Kelly's machinations. With his defeat, William restores his humanity, though Ieyasu's forces quickly take him prisoner. It's around this point that we learn more about Tenkai and his real identity as Akechi Mitsuhide. Back when Nobunaga ruled the land, Mitsuhide betrayed him, leaving him to die in a blaze. Initially thought dead, he changed his name and ultimately supported Ieyasu's vision for the country. Back in the present day, William eventually corners Kelly, but the latter enacts his real plan, reviving Oda Nobunaga. First, he needs to contend with Nobunaga's former vassal, Yosuke, but it's too late. Nobunaga has returned, and promptly breaks free from Kelly because, well, he's Oda freaking Nobunaga. He subsequently departs, though he isn't forgotten, appearing in a post-game mission and a challenging duo boss alongside the Yukiona, and it's just Kelly and William. With nowhere else to run, Kelly brings the mythical Yamata no Orochi to the forefront to defeat William. He fails, naturally, and upon recovering Saoirse, Kelly is revealed as just a lackey. The true mastermind, the one who tasked him with gathering Amrita, well, he's actually back in England. With Kelly dead, Hanzo reveals that he's under orders to kill William by Ieyasu to ensure that the secret of Amrita does not get out. William is aware of this, but instead, Hanzo lets his friend go, choosing to report him as dead, allowing him to leave Japan and return to England. The journey takes about 3 years, and by the time William arrives, Queen Elizabeth I is announced to have passed away. Furthermore, her advisor, John Dee, who was the mastermind behind Kelly's mission, has taken control. Infiltrating the Tower of London, William eventually meets with Dee. As it turns out, he discovered the power of Amrita long ago, and how it's used to create yokai from humans, which he then employed during naval combat against the Spanish Empire, even if it ultimately resulted in the transformed soldiers dying out. While scouring the world for Amrita, the conflict in Japan proved particularly enticing for Dee. If the war continued, then it could be used as a steady source for the substance. He now believes that with its power he can conquer England and eventually the world, and urges William to join his cause. Not being completely out of his mind and having developed a taste for smacking down tyrants, William refuses and proceeds to fight Dee. Despite the latter using the Amrita gathered to transform into the 100 Eyes, he is defeated and subsequently blinded. You would think this to be a happy ending for William, but alas, that just isn't the case. Following his departure, Ieyasu executed Mitsunari, became the first shogun, and heralded the beginning of the Edo period. And why did the country at large hear nothing about yokai or the contributions of one William Adams in making it all possible? Well, because Ieyasu concealed all of this, and he's also aware that William is alive. Of course, Ieyasu has other problems to deal with, namely Toyotomi Hideyori. The leader of the Toyotomi clan, who lost much of his land after the Battle of Sekigahara, he was commanded to ally with Ieyasu, but ultimately refused. He would eventually lead a rebellion with the help of Sanada Yukimura, but there's another figure seemingly pulling the strings behind the scenes. As for Williams, he returns to Japan in the Dragon of the North DLC after witnessing a vision through the 100 Eyes of Hanzo's death. Upon reuniting with Ieyasu, he learns that Date Masamune, who was seemingly an ally after Sekigahara, is plotting to overthrow the shogun using yokai. Hanzo was sent to investigate but went missing. William thus embarks on a mission to save him, defeating Date Shigezane, a general in the family and Masamune's close friend in the process. However, the real pusher for Masamune's plan is Maria, who was seemingly his attendant. As a spy for the Spanish Empire, she supplied Masamune with Amrita, seeking to leverage its power and ultimately restore its glory. Upon Masamune's fall, she escapes and approaches Hideyori. This leads to the second DLC, Defiant Honor, which takes place in winter during the siege of Osaka. Ieyasu's army battles against Yukimura's, with William coming to blows against the latter. Despite emerging victorious and Yukimura offering up his head as a trophy, the two are interrupted by Maria. Suddenly, Yodogimi, Hideyori's mother, has called for peace. In the midst of this, Hanzo is busy fighting against Sarutobi Sasuke, Yukimura's shinobi and close ally, who manages to retreat. As William and Yukimura look up at her on the castle balcony, she comments on how the latter's victory would be certain if they had the power of the Amrita. She looks upon her son, eyes glowing yellow, which leads to the third and final DLC, Bloodshed's End. Set several months later, it seems the call for peace did not last long, as the siege against Osaka Castle is still underway in the following summer. William battles Yukimura once more, and after defeating him, the latter admits that he can't follow Yodogimi anymore. Formerly childhood friends, her nature would change as she grew older. Despite staying loyal, he can no longer abide by her actions. After leaving Yukimura to his fate, William goes up against Hideyori, and though defeating him, he was never really alive to begin with. Instead, he was created by Yodogimi to serve as a clan head while she carried out her own plans. While William was busy, Hanzo returned to Ieyasu's camp and crossed blades against Yukimura, or so he thought. It actually turned out to be Sarutobi Sasuke, who assumed his master's identity to effectively fake his death. As for the real Yukimura, he ventured to Osaka Castle to join up with and fight alongside William. Together, the two battle through to Yodogimi, who's revealed to be possessed by an evil kitsune. Though emerging victorious, the castle is pretty much in ruins. William leaves to pursue Maria, who escaped once more, but Yukimura stays behind with Yodogimi, now free from the kitsune's influence, and they seemingly perish together. Hanzo and William gaze upon the fire engulfing Osaka Castle, the former commenting on how his work is done and it's time to protect the country from the shadows. Upon asking William what he'll do, he says that more will come in search of Amrita, which may mean another Spanish ninja. As they depart, a voiceover proclaims the beginning of the Ginna era in 1615, finally signaling the end of the bloodshed of the land. Maria remains at large, however, and her plans are far from over. At roughly 42 hours to complete the story for the base game and DLC, Nioh is a sweeping epic. Despite criticism surrounding its loot, namely the sheer amount, its acclaim is well warranted and still holds up after all of these years. That's especially the case for those with knowledge of the late Sengoku era and its key figures. The real-life William Adams, for example, went on to become a Hatamoto, aka a high-ranking advisor for Tokugawa. Despite being forbidden to leave for years, Adams ultimately remained in the country and passed away in 1620. That's not what becomes of Team Ninja's version of William, however. Who knows? We may just see him return sooner than later, but that is another story, one reserved for the sequel, Nioh 2. Now let's dive into the story of Nioh 2. To understand the present and look to the future, it's essential to examine the past. Japan is defined by its various tumultuous eras. The late Sengoku period leading into the Edo era, where the Tokugawa Shogunate reigned in relatively peaceful fashion, which didn't last, leading to the Bakumatsu and Meiji Restoration. But even during Nioh 1, as William Adams traipsed across Japan, helping Tokugawa Ieyasu emerge victorious against his enemies and become the first shogun, another story lay in wait, one that would lend a further dimension to the narrative as we know it. Now, naturally, we're talking about Nioh 2, released in 2021 and garnering nearly as much praise as the original. Despite retaining the same combat fundamentals, it ramped up the difficulty, added new weapon types, overhauled skill progression, and introduced a game changer, burst counters. Combined with the new yokai skills, where players could transform and unleash different kinds of attacks, adding even more to the build variety, freshened up the original hack-and-slash formula. Despite all that, the actual narrative starts before Nioh 1. While the latter primarily occurs in the 1600s, Nioh 2 is set in the late 1500s and focuses on Hidechio, aka Hide, who players can customize using the extensive creation suite. This approach was likely to introduce more original events into established history, as if Yokai Havoc and a massive conspiracy by John Dee were canon. However, it also presented an anomaly in the established order of humans and yokai, a shiftling. Half yokai and half human, a shiftling can shift between the two forms. Not only does it allow the human side to utilize Omnio magic, ninjutsu, but it also lets the player channel anima and unleash the power of a yokai. So one has to ask, in the myriad of schemes set to unravel in the late Sengoku era, who was Hide, and what is their story? It all starts with the journey to Jusen Zakura, which is under siege by bandits and yokai. While traveling, Hide receives a letter leading him to the town and sets about trying to save it, eventually clashing with the massive Mezuki. Things are going swimmingly enough until they start going berserk. Tokichiro, the one who sent the letter, intervenes and introduces himself as a merchant seeking out Amrita. Foresight is 2020, but Tokichiro isn't looking to fall prey to its corruption, not yet at least. Instead, he's hired by Saito Dosan, the former Viper of Mino, who went to great lengths to seize power and become the province's daimyo. Despite conflicts with a certain clan in Owari known as Oda, Dosan relented when he met their next heir, Nobunaga, and was impressed by him. As a result, his daughter, Nohime, was married to Nobunaga, thus creating an alliance between the two clans. Dosan now spends his days collecting spirit stones with the Saito clan, now headed by Yoshitatsu. Though Dosan's goal was to keep them away from the power-hungry, he failed to notice that his own offspring, Yoshitatsu, would betray him. As Hide and Tokichiro make their way to Dosan, they happen upon a yokai hunter, Mumyo, who leads a clan of similar-minded folk known as Sohaya. Despite considering Hide a threat due to their yokai nature, she leaves them be. Upon meeting with Dosan, Yoshitatsu initiates a coup to covet the spirit stones, even bringing along some yokai to help him out. Dosan eventually sacrifices himself to allow the pair to escape, but the main reason is that he realized that Hide is his son, with Miyoshino, a yokai, being their mother. With nowhere else to go, Hide and Tokichiro meet with Oda Nobunaga himself and become his vassals. They venture to different locations to assist Nobunaga's allies, including Shibata Katsui, the Oda clan's chief retainer, Maeda Toshie, a gifted spear user and Owari province commander, and Hachisuka Kuroku, who's also a shiftling. Eventually, they go up against Yoshitatsu at Inabayama Castle, on top of seeking his head for the sake of Nobunaga, adding the Mino province to his own. They're out to claim justice for Dosan. However, Hide discovers that Yoshitatsu is their twin, who remained with his father when Miyoshino took Hide to leave separately out of concerns for their safety. They also encounter Kashin Koji, a strange man from their nightmares who will quickly prove to be a thorn in their side. Koji is gone before Hide and Tokichiro can get any answers. Still, the day is won, and upon returning to Nobunaga, he names the pair Hideyoshi. Eventually, Hide and Mumyo are on better terms, both due to the former saving the latter from a yokai, and because Hide's dagger, a keepsake from their mother, resonates with her talisman. Nobunaga's campaign of conquest continues, as they venture to Otani Castle to safeguard Lady Oichi, his sister. Koji appears once more, this time possessing Azai Nagamasa, whose clan is at war with Nobunaga, and who also happens to be married to Oichi. Upon Azai's death, Koji departs, but not before delivering a cryptic message to Tokichiro. As it turns out, he's becoming swayed by the power of the Spirit Stones, especially after being entrusted with the same by Nobunaga. Koji sensed this and approached him, possessing Saito Toshimitsu, a retainer of the clan who serves Akechi Mitsuhide, a vassal under Nobunaga. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he was responsible for the incident that led to the death of Nobunaga and Nohime. The reason? Well, Nobunaga began dipping more into the power of the Spirit Stones, and Mitsuhide shared the same stance as Dosan. that they're dangerous, must be kept away from the power-hungry. It's one reason that he didn't like Hideyoshi, and Tokichiro began leveraging the Spirit Stones and their power for his own gains. Eventually, Mitsuhide is betrayed by the Koji-possessed Toshimitsu, but Hide shows up in time to save him. After Koji escapes, Tokichiro arrives and subsequently slays Toshimitsu. At this point, Tokichiro, once a sworn ally to Hide and Mumyo, has clearly fallen into the darkness and amassed a powerful army to gain control. With Nobunaga dead and no refuge, the duo escape with Mitsuhide in tow. You would think that all hope is lost, but fortunately there is a new hope: Tokugawa Ieyasu. Mitsuhide assumes a new identity, Tenkai, while a new mission sees Hide venturing to Kitan-no-sho Castle, under siege from Tokichiro's forces, to once again rescue Lady Oichi and her new husband, Shibata Katsui. Unfortunately, things take a terrible turn for your former ally. After Hide defeats Maeda Toshie, who sided with Tokichiro after Nobunaga's demise, Shibata transforms into a yokai. Hide has no choice but to kill Shibata, and already burdened by the death of her brother and unable to cope with this new despair, Oichi commits suicide. At this point, Tenkai and Senno Rikyu, a tea master and Nobunaga's former advisor, have had enough of Tokichiro and hatch a plan to defeat him. Hide ventures forth to meet Tokichiro, and the two friends battle to the death. While Hide emerges victorious, Koji rears his diabolical head once more, bringing Tokichiro back to life and possessing him. The yokai subsequently go mad, and after fighting two massive threats, Hide is killed by Tokichiro. But it's not the end. Hide awakens in the interim, the same place where they first started their adventure, and reunites with their mother. Along with revealing that Koji is the one who had killed her, she confirms that his real identity is Otakamaru, one of the three most infamous yokai in history, who could only be sealed away with the sword, Sohayamaru. Hide is brought back to life and must search for Sohayamaru, since it's the key to defeating Koji once and for all. They eventually arrive at Byoda Inn, where Tokichiro releases two powerful yokai, Shuten Doji, who Hide fights, and the Nine-Tailed Fox, who escapes and surely won't cause any more trouble. Meanwhile, the resonance of Hide's dagger and Mumyo's talisman, a sword guard, is more than just a coincidence. It's the key to restoring the sword. Of course, they also need a lot of spirit stones, which leads them to Tokichiro's stash. After slaying Lady Osakabe, a castle-sized yokai, Sohayamaru is brought back to its former glory. Hide fights Tokichiro again, and though forced to kill him, he eventually dispels Koji. Following a fight with Koji, who retreats but leaves behind a horn, Hide returns to Byodo Inn and seals Otakamaru by using Sohayamaru on it. It should be a happy ending, but who should show up but William, who's still on the hunt for Maria. He accidentally releases Koji, and the latter possesses Hide, leading to the two heroes clashing. Hide recovers his sense of will and dispels Koji, but it's revealed that Maria is planning to revive Tokichiro to keep the war going, since her purpose in Nioh 1's DLC has been shown to sow chaos in Japan. William has been chasing her ever since, with the final two chapters of Nioh 2's base story taking place in 1616 after the siege of Osaka. After thwarting Koji and preventing him from possessing Tokichiro again, Hide battles against the transformed Otakamaru. Thankfully, he's not alone, as Tokichiro fights alongside him. The yokai is defeated once and for all, Maria is apprehended, and William reunites with Hattori Hanzo. Tokichiro ventures to the afterlife, having somewhat redeemed himself, but there's still work for a pair of yokai hunters. After saying goodbye to their friend, Hide and Mumyo venture forth to hunt. While that marks the end of the base game, it is not the end of Hide's story, by a long shot. When he slew Otakamaru, Sohayamaru offered a vision of those who previously wielded it. In The Tengu's Disciple, Hide discovers Kurama Tengu, who emerges after a reaction with the sword and sends them to the past. They meet with Minamoto no Yoshitsune, who also wielded Sohayamaru during the Heian period. Fighting together against the Taira clan, Yoshitsune is enraged after the death of Benkei, his trusted retainer, who nonetheless went down swinging to protect his master, and becomes a yokai. After being defeated by Hide, he's back to normal. However, the mystery behind Sohayamaru thickens, and after seeing a strange vision, Yoshitsune gives Hide his flute, and the latter travels further back in time. Thus, we arrive at Darkness in the Capital, the second DLC where Hide encounters Minamoto no Yorimitsu, a yokai hunter who also wielded Sohayamaru. Though she mistakenly attacks Hide, she's eventually sent back to Rashomon Gate by Sakata no Kintoki to defend the capital. Yorimitsu is then captured by a yokai but freed with Hide's help. The latter eventually arrives at the Imperial Palace at the behest of Abe no Saimei, Yorimitsu's ally, to fight against Ashiya Domen, who is responsible for the yokai attack. Before he can fight Domen, Hide must deal with beloved cat spirit Nekomata, who's been twisted into the White Tiger and attacks. Upon defeating it, with Saimei helping to restore it because we still need him for Nioh 1, Hide sets out for Domen, who dies to summon the 8 powerful lightning aspects of Yomi. Upon defeating Yomi, it's revealed that Domen was possessed by, and that's right, Kashin Koji. With the former's death, he escapes. In the meantime, Hide ventures to Byoda Inn and finds Yorimitsu, and Saimei sealing away Shuten Doji and the Nine-Tailed Fox. They end up giving their lives to achieve this, and Hide must venture even further back. In the first Samurai DLC, which is ironic because the last Samurai was the final mission in Nioh, Bloodshed's End, players finally learn the origins of Otakamaru. As narrated by Hide's mother, he was a beloved figure in the high-end period. However, they would come to fear him and eventually attack, causing Otakamaru to retaliate, wreaking havoc and destroying the neighboring village, but a mysterious hero has succeeded in stopping him. After finding Otakamaru and nearly going berserk again, Suzuka, the former sister, intervenes. After ensuring Hide's well-being, she ventures forth to find her brother, but ends up accosted by Tate Ieboshi, Otakamaru's lackey. Hide saves her, and in return, Suzuka bestows them with Sohaya. Combined with Ieboshi's spirit stones and Suzuka's sword, this forms Sohayamaru. Armed with the mythical sword once more, Hide battles Otakamaru, who fuses with Aratama to transform into the Nightmare Bringer. Naturally, Hide emerges victorious, and in that moment, Otakamaru leaves his hatred for humanity behind, realizing that the Shiftling is proof of humanity and yokai coexisting. Koji seemingly tries to emerge from Otakamaru's horn until Hide uses Sohayamaru, seals him, and returns to the present. Suzuka, who lost her memories to develop Sohayamaru, sees all of this and relays the story to her child in the future. Only that child is Hide. Yes, Miyoshino, Hide's mother, was actually Suzuka the entire time, which means Otakamaru is actually the protagonist's uncle. We then see the siblings reunited in the afterlife and finally moving on in peace. With the events of Nioh 2 coming full circle at the end of the first Samurai, how does Nioh 3 possibly connect to the previous games? If you're the heir apparent to the Tokugawa Shogunate, and for Nioh 3's story setup, that's what you are, life isn't too shabby. As Takachiyo, the descendant of Tokugawa Ieyasu, who William and Hide fought under to bring peace during the late Sengoku period, you are next in line to become shogun. Edo is a bustling city in the era of peace following the bloody siege of Osaka, not to mention the innumerable conflicts against the yokai look to continue. Until, of course, the yokai suddenly return. From sparring with their younger brother Tokugawa Kunimatsu under the tutelage of Yagyu Munenori to suddenly witnessing a dark presence over Edo, followed by the slaughter of their servants, it's clear that the age of bloodshed has returned. Rescued by the ever-loyal Hattori Hanzo, the siblings must follow Munenori to the outside, engaging yokai in conflict. Takachiyo picks up several different tactics, and after splitting up from Kunimatsu, rendezvous with Saito Fuku, who raised and taught them since childhood, underground, where all the spirit stones are stored. Kunimatsu shortly joins up with them, and out of nowhere, stabs Fuku. As it turns out, he's responsible for the darkness in the capital, all because grandfather Ieyasu, with all of his power as the Ogoshu, decided that Takachiyo would be the next shogun. En route to the storehouse, he slayed Munenori and Hanzo en route to his brother, cementing his betrayal and ensuring that no one could stop the yokai's rampage through Edo. The two siblings battle, and Kunimatsu easily overpowers Takachiyo. Though Fuku intervenes to raise a barrier and protect the latter, it is easily destroyed. However, something strange happens. Kusanagi, who resonates with the Spirit Stones, Takachiyo ends up in what seems to be the interim from Nioh 2. Accompanied by Nekomata, who was entrusted to him by Hanzo, Takachiyo arrives at a rather curious place, the Sengoku period, where he spots Takeda Shingen, a daimyo opposed to Ieyasu and seeking to rout him. Takachiyo gives chase and ends up meeting Honda Tadakatsu from Nioh 2, who serves under Ieyasu, whom Takachiyo used to playfully pester during his childhood. Unfortunately, his exceptional battle prowess doesn't mean much when Takeda's Crimson Army attacks. Takachiyo arrives in time to help, but it's not long before Yamagata Masakage, senior retainer and leader of his Crimson Army, shows up to play spoiler. Takachiyo fights him off, however, and accompanies Tadakatsu to Hamamatsu Castle to rendezvous with Ieyasu. Unfortunately, something else is looming over the castle, a dark presence, which seemingly resembles the one that appeared over Edo. We learn that this is a crucible, a territory where the yokai have free reign, and life corrosion can affect Takachiyo. However, they can harness living artifact, a powerful form of dishing out tons of damage, which will be key to destroying the crucible. That's pretty much most of the story content from the demo, and you really have to wonder, where could things go from here? We already know that Takachiyo will visit other pivotal moments in Japan's history, including the Heian period and Bakumatsu. However, I think this is more than just a simple time-traveling story where notable characters from previous titles make appearances. Before being whisked away by Kusanagi, Takachiyo is asked a vital question by their sibling. What makes a shogun? They don't offer an answer, of course, which Kunimatsu gloats about, but the fact that they're sent back to the Sengoku period where Ieyasu was a major player, even though Oda Nobunaga is still the dominant force, is a factor. Not only are they gaining power to challenge their brother, but to learn from their ancestors what it means to be a shogun. Spoiler, at least I think it will be, it's not just power, which Kunimatsu possesses plenty of. It's an indomitable will, a vision for the future, which we've seen with Ieyasu, who resonates with the people. Perhaps his grandfather believes that the emotional component is key to being a strong leader and the rightful shogun. The fact that players venture to the Bakumatsu, which takes place after the Edo period by the way, and meets his descendant, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, is even more evidence. The real-life Yorinobu, for those unaware, wanted to reform the shogunate. The fact that he was the final shogun who never even entered Edo Castle and ultimately resigned from his position only after spending a year in it should tell you everything. It's almost as if Takachiyo is on a journey to learn the highs and the lows of the position, what makes a good leader, and what results in the fall of another. But wait, you're no doubt wondering, what about the Heian period? This is notable because it appeared significantly in Nioh 2's DLC and helped explain the origins of Sohayamaru and the big bad Otakamaru. The answer probably lies in Kusanagi. My theory is that Nioh 3's Kusanagi is similar to Sohayamaru, and it's effectively working with Takachiyo, even if they're not fully aware of it yet, to regain its true form. Why is that? Well, since it represents valor, it may be trying to stop a vile entity from wreaking havoc in space-time. Now, all of these are grand theories, of course, and we won't know the truth until Nioh 3 launches on February 6th. Nevertheless, even with reviews criticizing the story, it'll still be interesting to see how it handles Japanese history and whether past heroes like William and Hide jump in to lend a hand at any point.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.